the strange and miraculous force that comes to the rescue. Drummer Eddie Taduri has played with some of the biggest bands of the 70s. The Beach Boys, Ike and Tina Turner, and the Eagles. He toured the world, had his share of fame and fortune, and finally settled down in Southern California. It was here in Carpinteria that the drummer who had everything nearly lost it all. Eddie was an avid body surfer, and he often took breaks from his music to enjoy the waves near his home. On this particular day, the ocean looked deceptively calm, until you swam into its powerful grasp.
The waves were very strong and angry, is the way I would describe it. I've been body surfing for many years, and I've gotten beat up a few times in the surf, but not like this.
But Eddie didn't pay attention to the danger signals that day. He kept riding the waves until he made the wrong decision and chose one that was ominous and lethal.
I jumped in this wave and it just pounded me into the bottom.
Eddie's head slammed into the ocean floor, snapping his neck and wrenching his spine. He was paralyzed instantly, his arms and legs dangling, useless and motionless, the dead weight of his body pulling him to the bottom.
I became separate from my body. I was watching what was going on, watching my arm float by, watching the bubbles rise to the surface.
The ocean currents were pulling Eddie deeper and deeper out to sea.
And then to my right, I felt an energy that it's really very difficult to describe. A very enticing, warm, loving energy. At that moment, I thought, I'm going to die now.
Unable to swim or even move, there was no possible way for Eddie to prevent himself from drowning. And so finally, he gave in to the inevitable.
And I opened my mouth to let the water in so I could go with this energy. I was lifted straight up out of the water, and I got a mouthful of air.
It was as if two strong hands had grabbed him under the arms, gently lifting and carrying him across the surface of the water and placing him carefully on shore. But who could have carried him to this spot? There wasn't a soul in sight. Eddie lay motionless on the beach, unable to lift his head or feel the weight of his body against the sand.
It was very strange. It was dead meat. I wasn't attached to it. I couldn't move anything.
Alone, isolated and trembling with fear, he hoped that someone would find him soon. Otherwise, he'd surely drown in the incoming tide. Finally, a lifeguard discovered him, and Eddie was rushed to a nearby hospital in Santa Barbara. Dr. Carl Sandin describes the severity of his injuries.
As a result of the forces applied to his neck, the disc, which is between the bones in the neck, got squished and ruptured and pushed out against his spinal cord. When it pushed out against his spinal cord, that pressure left him with paralysis and loss of sensation.
Eddie needed surgery immediately. It was unlikely that he would ever walk again, but Eddie was confident that the same mysterious force that pulled him from the ocean was still there, watching over him.
I felt like there were angels everywhere. I felt like there was somebody holding my hand. I thought everybody was an angel in those first few days, and they probably were. They were wonderful. They were incredible.
Eddie survived the delicate 6-hour surgery, where doctors fused together 3 of his vertebrae. But regaining the full use of his body after such a crippling accident would take a miracle.
Okay, and then start again.
Within weeks, he began the arduous process of rehabilitation. Eddie's struggle to recover even the slightest control over his body would demand grueling effort. Nevertheless, with unyielding persistence and a positive attitude, Eddie slowly began to make progress.
Sometimes this hand, only this finger would move, barely move that much. And I said, yeah, I was very encouraged and positive, stayed positive every day.
In spite of the overwhelming odds against his recovery, Eddie was determined to walk again.
I did have the sense that they thought I wouldn't walk. I could see the concern in their faces. Although in my heart I believed I would walk and I'd be okay.
Little by little, Eddie was beating the odds, and finally he was back on his feet, walking the same ocean beach where he'd nearly lost his life.
I think the near-death experience affected my attitude towards my recovery.
That experience of being crushed by the power of a single wave, left paralyzed underwater to die, and then being miraculously lifted by some mysterious force and carried back to safety, can only be described in one way.
That was miraculous.
Although no one can explain what happened that day, Eddie is certain what his miracle means.
I'm here for a reason. I am alive. It wasn't my time yet.